Hi, everybody. This is Mary Beth Uberti with Operation Parent. I can see everybody's coming into the webinar, and I just want to thank you for attending today. This is a webinar specifically sponsored by Concrete Resources, and today's topic is helping kids overcome school anxiety and build resiliency, featuring Dr. Sharon Saline. And at Operation Parent, we had Dr. Sharon Saline present for us in this fall. She does a phenomenal job, and I'm sure we'll have lots of questions. I'm going to just let the doors open for another minute before we go ahead and get started. So with that, we'll just let it go for just another minute. I can see people coming in, and that's wonderful. Hold on. All right. I'll give it another minute, and then we should be ready to go. And I've heard that out in Washington, there was some rough winds last night. I hope everybody's good and nobody lost any trees, especially on top of houses. So we are actually in Louisville, Kentucky. So we are actually having a sunny day in the 40s, which is really, really nice for us. And I see somebody has a question. Let me just see. Okay. And let's see here. All right. All right, just for sake of everybody else, so you know how this all works, we do record this event. So this event is recorded. You will receive a copy of recording link this evening, about 6 hours after we're done today. And you will have in that follow-up email a survey that we ask you to complete, as well as the recording link. Whether you attend live or you are going to watch or you miss, you'll get the recording link, as well as an additional resources provided by Dr. Saline. So look out for that email. It'll come from the same email address as your confirmation email. Also, in that, for those of you that are attending live today, for those attending live, you will receive a certificate of attendance. So if you need it for your hours for education purposes, that'll give you that. If for any reason you'd rather have a certificate that lists the length of time of the webinar, please email me at marybeth@operationparent.org and I will get you a different certificate. The certificate you will receive is actually coming from GoToWebinar. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get moving along here. So we're going to just go to the next slide here. And again, welcome everybody to our webinar today. Again, my name is Mary Beth Uberti with Operation Parent. We are so excited to have you here. For those of you that are kind of new to Operation Parent, we are a nonprofit here in Louisville, Kentucky. We provide information to parents, caregivers, anyone involved raising a preteen and teen on a variety of teen topics. Anything from drugs, alcohol, internet, to mental health issues. So our focus is really to provide as much information about warning signs, trends, misconceptions, where to go for help. We've moved to doing webinars the past 4 years, and it has taken off very well for us. We provide monthly webinars. So what I just encourage you to do, if you have never been to Operation Parent's website, please go to operationparent.org. And then on our main page, you will see the upcoming webinar. We do one event live every month. Plus we host recordings or rebroadcasted webinars, which are older webinars. So right on our main page, you will always see the registration for the most current, what is coming up. If you would like information on recorded webinars or anything that's rebroadcast, it's real easy from our main page. Go to resources and then you will see webinars and you can check out anything else that's going on. Please know we always record our webinars. They are available. The recordings get sent to anybody who registers for our webinars, so you can listen at your convenience. With that, I just want to open up the microphone for Erin from the Concrete Resource Coalition. Erin, are you there?
Hi, yes, thank you.
You are welcome. So go ahead and feel free to welcome your attendees.
Thank you. Hi, as Mary Beth said, my name is Erin Sendrick, and I am a co-coordinator with the Concrete Resource Coalition, which is located in Concrete, Washington. And we are a community coalition working to create positive change and build a healthier community. And we are always looking for parent voices at our coalition meetings. You can be in Concrete, Cedar Woolley, or Mount Vernon. If you're interested, you can or just want more information, you can send me an email. It's erynn.sendrick@unitedgeneral.org. And I will make sure that that email gets out to you so that if you have questions or would like to attend a coalition meeting, I can get you that information. And thank you so much for being here today. We are really grateful to be able to offer this opportunity and glad to have you.
Erin, can you do me a favor? Can you email me your email address at
Yes.
marybeth@operationparent.org, and I will put that into the follow-up email so that if anybody does want to get in touch with the coalition, they can reach out to you. How's that?
That sounds great. Thank you, Mary Beth.
No problem. All right, Erin, I'm going to go ahead and turn off your microphone, and I'm so glad that you are here today. All right, so again, some things to discuss while we're getting ready to get this webinar started is the control panel that you are seeing on your screen with GoToWebinar. A couple things I do want to make you aware of and how we can communicate is through our question tab. So with that little box that is an arrow in it, that is the minimize the control panel. If you click it, you can minimize the control panel. You click it again, you maximize it, you can see it. But open it up, and then further down, you will see the questions section. This is where you're going to communicate with us. This is the best way to communicate with us. As we go through the webinar today, if you have a question for Dr. Saline, please put it here. Okay, so if you have a question for Dr. Saline, I just encourage you to go to the question section, type in it, and send it. We will have a check-in halfway through the event for quick questions, and then we will have the full question and answer session at the end. We will conclude promptly at 1 hour and 30 minutes. If we have not answered all the questions, I will send them to Dr. Saline, the remaining ones, and she'll get back in touch with you. Okay, so please communicate with us through the question section. The other thing I want to call your attention to is the handout section. So if you click into that section, you will see 2 handouts available to you. You can download them now while we're in the live event. About an hour prior to this event, you should have received an email from me at marybeth@operationparent.org, and I attached the email in the email I attached the handouts, as well as an additional resource Dr. Saline was sharing with you. So if you did not see that email, please go back into your emails later on today and look for an email from marybeth@operationparent.org, and you will see the handouts. But for those of you that are live today, very easy, go in there into handout section, click, and start the download process. Okay, and as I mentioned, we are recording this, so you will get the recording whether you're attending live or you're not able to attend and you're going to be watching it at your convenience. So just keep an eye for the follow-up email. That'll come out this evening, your time, about 7, 8 o'clock tonight. You should have it in your email. So with that, I'm going to open up Dr. Saline's camera and wait for Dr. Saline to, there you are. Hello.
Hello, Mary Beth, and hello, Erin. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, well, we are excited, and let me get your screen ready. And with that, I'm going to turn off my camera and mute myself. And Dr. Saline, the stage is yours.
Okay, so let's go to the first slide. I'm going to, let's see, Mary Beth, can I have control over the slides, please? Or could you advance?
I can advance, or do you want control?
No, you can just say, I can, I'll just say next.
Okay, that's fine. All right.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about anxiety, which is one of my favorite topics. And our learning objectives include describing how anxiety works in the body and the brain. We're going to identify patterns of negative thinking, and we're going to learn how to externalize anxiety and practical tools for dealing with it, as well as to identify and develop areas of resilience in learning. And I realized that I didn't introduce myself, so let me go backwards. I'm Dr. Sharon Saline. I'm sorry, Mary Beth, can we go back? I'm Dr. Sharon Saline. I'm a clinical psychologist and author of What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew and the ADHD Solution Card Deck. I've been in private practice for almost 30 years. I've been working with neurodiverse kids and their families and adults for my entire career. And I'm very excited to be here with you today to talk about one of my favorite subjects, something that's near and dear to my own heart, which is anxiety. So I know we went over the learning objectives. We're doing this a little bit backwards, but let's go to our first slide of the presentation. Thank you so much, Mary Beth. So these are very stressful and uncertain times. What's happened right now? What's happening right now? So kids started the school year with hopes and goals, and things have floundered. And so today in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about kids who are neurodiverse, kids who have ADHD or learning disabilities or on the spectrum, and also kids who are more neurotypical. We're talking about anxiety in teens. Now, some teens are progressing well and others not so much. And remote or hybrid learning, which was once novel oh so long ago, has become much more tedious. What we're seeing is increased anxiety, frustration, isolation, and hopelessness. And these are getting in the way of attending and participating in classes, doing homework, staying with chores or interest-based activities like hobbies. Kids are lonely, bored, and their lives continue to feel upended by a pandemic, and they have no sense of self-control. It's much more, excuse me, of a struggle now to begin, stick with, and complete tasks. Novelty and hope for the new school year have long diminished for many students, and they're sort of stuck in the drudgery. And you're probably seeing a lot of negative attitude changes and more pushback. Kids are overwhelmed, and it's hard for them to see the value or sense in things that they were able to do earlier. There might be increased interest and reliance on screens. In fact, I don't even know why I say might be, there is. And it's harder for teens to get off these screens and to break from, because these screens are a break from other pressures, and it's really their lifeline in terms of connecting with peers and the outside world. There's a big disparity in the access to remote learning tools and internet connections depending on socioeconomic and ethnic issues. In a June survey by Parents Together, the results found that parents with low income were 10 times as likely to report that their children were doing little to no remote learning compared to those with incomes of $100,000. And the APA, the American Psychological Association, conducts regular surveys on stress in America. And this survey in October of 2020 showed that 81% of teens between the ages of 13 and 17 report the negative impacts of the pandemic-related school changes. And 51% say that planning for the future feels impossible. An APA Harris poll found in October that nearly 8 in 10 adults, 78%, say the coronavirus pandemic is a significant source of stress in their lives. So this is the environment, this is the crucible in which we are living. And today we're going to discuss anxiety in teens, how to shift from anxiety to curiosity and focus on what we can control, how to create daily routines based on collaboration, realistic expectations, and predictability, and how to address the paradox of home learning and home working. Next. Does this sound familiar? My mom wakes me up for school and then yells at me when I don't move. Why get out of bed for school? There's nowhere to go, and I don't see my friends. Isaiah, age 12. My daughter Zara is 13 years old with ADHD and dyslexia. After a while, she could not handle Zoom anymore. She would just refuse. She'll do anything but focus. Kendra, age 9, says, and that's a little bit younger than adolescence, but I want to throw this in. I miss seeing my friends and my dad having money to get us the stuff we need. I'm scared about him getting sick, and then I won't have food for anything. Another parent shared with me, remote learning was awful. My son's inattention and frustration got the best of him. He's 13 and he defaulted to flight mode in regards to assignment completion, resorted to lying that he was doing things when he wasn't. And then another parent said, not having to go to school and deal with other kids was much less difficult for my son, Devlin, who's 15, with anxiety. He liked being able to see and talk to kids on the online classrooms or play video games when he wanted. He could moderate the contact. Next.
Okay, we're going to launch a poll. So here goes the poll. And all right, so the question is, what is your child's biggest challenge? So everybody just go ahead and select one option as your child's biggest challenge right now. And we'll give you a couple seconds to go ahead, and the answers are coming in. Great job, everybody. All right, I'm going to give it another second because I think we're getting toward the end of everybody putting it in there.
All right.
There's a few people that have not voted, so go ahead, everybody. Just go ahead. I see about 69% voted. Would love it to get to 100%. So, oh, we're getting there.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
Wonderful.
Couple more seconds. We're at 83, so I'm missing a few people. No pressure or anything, but we're missing a few people.
The pressure's
All
on.
right. What?
I said the pressure's on.
That's right. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll.
Fantastic.
And let me share. So what everybody has posted is 40% say loneliness and difficulty is the problem, 23% incomplete assignments or inadequate support, 3% disorganization with school and home stuff, 30% increase in anxiety or depression, and 3% with coping with food, housing, or family job insecurity.
Well, thank you so much, Mary Beth. And I just want to point out that I did a similar presentation for Operation Parent in September, and the feedback was very different.
Yeah.
The number one challenge was disorganization with school and home stuff. And the number 2 was increase in anxiety and depression. So that stayed similar. But what shifted is that right now the number 1 concern is loneliness and difficulty maintaining social connections. And we'll try to address that in this presentation, but if not, in our question and answer section. So let's go on to the next slide. Anxiety disorders, it's the next one.
Yeah, so just, there we go.
Anxiety disorders are problems related to fears and worries. Anxiety disorders differ based on the focus of a person's worry. Anxiety is all about safety and security. It wants to make uncomfortable feelings and uncertainty go away immediately. Anxious kids often have low self-confidence and problematic peer relations, as well as academic difficulties and family conflict. Now, we have to remember that anxiety is a natural human response that comes from serving a purpose. It's helped us stay alive lo these many centuries. And our goal isn't to dismiss it entirely, but to respond to it in ways that are healthy and manageable. Anxious kids struggle with tolerating uncertainty, solving problems effectively, and often fall lower on autonomy scales. We want to teach them to be bored by anxiety, not frightened by it. Interestingly, children of anxious parents are more likely to be anxious and perceive ambiguous situations as threatening. There's a genetic component to anxiety, which is often more like a predisposition to it. Although in my case, I come from a long line of anxious, neurotic Jewish women, I'm pretty sure it's in my genes. Hopefully I brought a smile to your faces. So let's go to the next slide. So what is anxiety? Anxiety is experienced cognitively and physically. Anxiety is adaptive and helps our bodies prepare for real danger. You know, we learned how to, like, we went out and we got something to eat and we heard a crick crick and we look up and there's a tiger. Our amygdala, that's part of our limbic system that controls the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, would kick into gear and turn us around, and boom, we'd run back to our cave. But eventually we'd get hungry and we'd have to go out again. And the next time we hear a crick crick, our body has that same rush of emotion, the same response, the anxiety, even though it's a squirrel. So there's a false alarm in the face of an episode of a genuine threat. Now, sometimes there are real concerns and the threats are not false alarms, but the reaction is disproportionate to the event itself. So you hear that crick crick your second time you're out and you run back to your cave because your reaction is the same as if it were a tiger when it's just a squirrel. Anxiety reflects all or nothing thinking and a negative expectancy. Next slide. So let's look at some of the statistics about anxiety. It's common for all kids and teens to experience some type of anxiety seen as worry, dread, fear, or distress. There's some nervousness in a new situation that we expect. And in these moments, it's normal for kids to retreat from the event and rely more on parents or friends for reassurance until they learn the skills, they master the tasks associated with these situations and feel more confident. 35% of kids with ADHD have been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And the top predictor of depression in kids is untreated anxiety, often due to peer isolation. Now, in COVID-19, we've seen increased parental tension and child frustrations, leading to increased conflict. A Common Sense Media study in March of 2020 reported that 61% of parents were yelling at their kids more than they used to, and over 50% said that financial concerns and social distancing were interfering with parenting. This was last March, so we can only imagine that those numbers have increased since then. Next slide, please. When we are diagnosing anxiety, we want to ask some important questions. Does a teen's behavior seem atypical for their age? Is their reaction out of proportion to the actual danger that's being presented? What is the frequency and consistency of these behaviors? What, if anything, is happening at home or at school that could be contributing to their emotional state and behaviors? So we want to get information from kids, from parents, from teachers, from their doctor, whoever, if you are a treating therapist who's doing the diagnosis, but perhaps you are the doctor, these are the kinds of questions, or the nurse practitioner that you want to ask. It's important to remember that right now that there are real dangers that many people are facing due to food, housing, job insecurity, and the effects of systemic racism. These fears exacerbate our sense of being out of control, and these are not fears that are, false alarms. They're real for many people. How does anxiety work? So we all receive information from our bodies about anxiety, physiological information, uncomfortable body states, cognitive information, worried thinking, and psychological information, distorted beliefs. There's a difference between a real danger, boy, that car's coming at me really fast while I'm trying to cross the street, and a perceived danger, that small spider crawling on the floor 10 feet away could bite me and kill me. Okay, those are very, very different. And so we want to teach our teens how to distinguish between these perceptions. We want to identify the signals that let us know that we're feeling anxious. Is our heart rate increasing? Are you sweating? Are you feeling hot? Is the volume of your voice going up? We want to remember that worry is how we think about something, and anxiety is our physical response based on triggers. So what happens is that we have a trigger and then our worried thoughts. And we want to intervene between the trigger and the worried thoughts, because the worried thoughts produce anxiety and those distorted beliefs. Next slide. Worry is a condition where we expect a negative outcome. I think that's right. Anxiety is a condition of over-responding to a fear or worry. Worriers turn what-ifs into believable situations. And worries, on the flip side, worriers are excellent planners. I'm a terrific planner. They have future-focused thinking, and they have creative ways of seeing things. They're just applying that creativity to the worst-case scenario rather than to other types of problem solving. Next slide. There are two types of worry that lead to anxiety. Productive worry is worry about doing things. Homework, getting to work on time, remembering to charge your phone. These traits contribute to the helpful planning side of anxiety. Poisonous worry is worry about things you cannot control. Thunderstorms, whether people will like you or if the plane will crash. Productive stress versus poisonous stress is something we need to identify, because in some communities, anxiety is real because the danger and the hardship is real. And so we have to help kids identify what is stress based on realistic threats and what is stress that you're imagining. Because the stress based on realistic threats, you can plan for, you can brainstorm about what to do. Now, anxiety is dramatic. It brings along tantrums, and for teenagers, those tantrums are in screaming, maybe crying, kicking, slamming doors, throwing things. Anxiety is manipulative. It wants comfort and certainty. Anxiety means that your teen is being pushed into a situation where they do not have the internal skills to manage it. We need to teach them these skills. And I'm going to say that again. Anxiety is showing us that your child or teen is being pushed or is in a situation where they do not have the internal skills. They cannot access their resources in order to manage the challenges they are facing. It's a red flag for us. Our job is to teach them these skills. We can never close the certainty gap for people. Life is impossible to live without feeling uncomfortable in some way. We've all learned to push through those moments when we're uncomfortable or unsure to get to the other side. That's how we build feeling competent. And this is what we want to teach our kids. Next slide. Now, how does trauma affect child development and anxiety? When kids have grown up with trauma, whether that's physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, or the trauma of systemic racism or poverty, they rely more on their amygdala, their emotional brain, which it makes it easier for them to jump to anxiety and agitation. So the brain develops from the back to the front and the inside out. And in the back of the brain, where that ridge is our reptilian brain. It's what keeps us alive. It's our physiological brain, heart rate, breathing, blood pressure. The middle of the brain is the emotional brain, also known as the mammalian brain. This is where the seat of languages and memory, as well as managing emotions. And then the frontal brain right here, the prefrontal cortex, is often called the thinking brain or the human brain. Because kids who've experienced trauma tend to hang out more in their emotional brain, it gives us some insight into why reactions to traumatic events can be more intense for many teens than for kids. Also because the prefrontal cortex, this part of our brain right here, finishes developing in age 25 for neurotypical brains and around age 28 for brains with ADHD. There's a bit of a lag. So for teenagers who spend more time in their emotional brain, they will have bigger reactions in general to things. Kids who've experienced trauma may tend to mature more slowly, hang out with the other kids, prefer very comfortable situations. It can be difficult for them to form lasting friendships or know how to soothe themselves when they're upset. These kids require solid trauma-informed care, with the addition of building up cognitive skills over emotions. We want to ask questions such as, what has happened to you that you've developed these beliefs and behaviors, not questions like, what is wrong with you? When trauma is combined with ADHD in child and teen development, these kids need extra help in learning how to build the ability for self-management using executive functioning skills. Because when you have ADHD, your executive functioning skills are delayed. And we also see this in some kids with learning disabilities and who are on the spectrum as well. Next slide. What are some typical worries for teens? So we'll see in middle school, the growing importance of social status and social comparisons can lead to worries about acceptance and fitting in. There are concerns about athletic, academic, or musical, or theatrical, or artistic performance, whatever they're interested in. And there's, of course, noticing much more and responding to peer pressure. By high school, these worries combine to add to concerns about riskiness and safety, finding a group that reflects their chosen identity, larger world issues, moral questions, and a future path. Teens want autonomy and independence from adults and their parents, but they're also afraid of that separation at the same time. Now, during COVID, we're seeing much more of this fear. We're also seeing a lot more anxiety and anger about the situation as well. What I meant to say is we're seeing more anger that's contributing to the anxiety. I'm sorry. So what do teens say about anxiety? Evan, age 17, says, what I mean by anxious is I remember ever since I was little, I would have really irrational fears of bad things happening or things just not working out. I feel like I have this weight on my chest a lot of the time. Just really, really pessimistic views of everything. And that would make me nervous about reality. Maya, age 10, says, my worries start as a hair clip in my stomach and then become a swirling in my head. Sometimes when I am nervous, like in school, if I don't know the answer, I chew on my shirt. Sometimes they say, you're not going to be able to sleep. What if you can't sleep? And that makes me not sleep. It's hard to stop my brain. And finally, Joaquin, who's 16 with ADHD, tells me, my mom may worry about things she has no control over, like the weather, but I worry about things I have to do and that I'll forget them. I totally feel panicky because there's something I think I need to be doing, but I can't remember what. Hopefully me thinking about it and keeping it in my head makes me do it. Otherwise, if it's not in my head, it doesn't exist. And of course, we know that trying to keep everything in your head only fosters more anxiety. Next slide. So how are we going to approach anxiety in a different way? And I'm going to flip a little bit, I'm going to flip anxiety on its head a little bit, and I expect lots of questions from you about this. If we go towards our fear, it gets weaker, but it's going to push back to try to get you to give in to its unrealistic and fearful demands. So we want to treat dealing with anxiety a little bit like a game. I'm not saying we want to minimize it. What I'm saying we want to do is investigate it. We want to frame it. We want to externalize anxiety. A lot of times when people are anxious, they believe they are the anxiety. And what I'm saying is we want to say things to them that they can then learn to say to themselves, such as, you're right to be scared. You're not sure you can handle X. It's natural to worry in that situation. Instead of, what are you worried about? It'll be fine. right? That's really not going to make them feel better. Or this isn't such a big deal. I don't know why you're getting so worked up. Also, not going to help, because anxiety likes both of those comments. It feeds anxiety. When we allow people to be where they are, when we allow teens to be scared and we normalize it for them, then they can start to calm down. It's the reaction to the worry, not eliminating it, that makes the difference. We have to help teens learn how to step back and see how their anxiety operates and not react to its fearful demands. We want to help kids expect to worry in situations that are challenging, because if you expect to worry, then you're taking some of the power away from the anxiety. Worry says blah, 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 and you can't handle it. Anxiety is an overestimation of the problem and an underestimation of the resources available to deal with it. So what's happening is worry is like, you can't do this, it's not going to work out. And instead of, and makes this problem seem really big, instead of, this is a problem, we've been in a similar situation like this before, I have some resources, I know what I'm going to apply here. So our goal in helping kids manage anxiety, and frankly helping ourselves, is to teach them how to tolerate and cope with uncertainty in their lives, realistically evaluate the safety of a given situation on their own, and build on past successes and apply those tools to the current challenge. This is how we develop resiliency. When you can tolerate the discomfort of not knowing and being disappointed, when you believe that you can bounce back from things because you've done so in the past, you're developing the resilience that's crucial for becoming a competent, successful adult. Next slide. So how are we going to do this? Okay, so anxiety is showing us that there's a situation that I don't know how to handle. Okay, I don't know what the skills are that I need to manage this situation. And it's impossible to live a full life without feeling uncomfortable. So think about your own life. I'm sure you've had to push through many times when you were uncertain, or you were frightened, or you didn't think you had it in you. This is one of those times in our lives right now. And it's very hard to continue to dig up the resources and the resilience to get through. And we can talk about that a little bit later, because I'm seeing a lot of resilience fatigue. People just are burnt out. They're tired. They're tired of COVID. They're tired of worrying. They're tired of online or hybrid school. And those are real conditions and real feelings. We want to build on our executive functioning skills to develop confidence. So the executive functioning skills are the management systems of the brain. They're located here behind in our prefrontal cortex, but they're not specific organs. What they are a set of skills that help our brain, are the directive capacities of our brain to help us live our lives. And they're things like impulse control, emotional control, organization, planning, prioritizing, sustained attention, working memory, time management, shift, flexibility, and goal-directed persistence. And the very last executive functioning skill to develop is what I call self-evaluation. It's also known as metacognitive awareness. It's how we perceive and understand ourselves. These are the skills that we need to rely on to fight back when we're having an anxiety attack, to learn how to turn down the volume on the intensity and the frequency of the anxiety we're experiencing. Next slide. So the way we're going to do this is by changing our relationship to worry, changing your teen's relationship to worry by using externalization and levity. And what I mean by that is we're going to treat anxiety like a puzzle. We're going to investigate it with our Sherlock Holmes hat on, and we're going to frame it. I wonder what anxiety is telling you about yourself right now. Or, I notice anxiety is taken over and is telling you that you need to be afraid and never go out, not go back to school because, it's not going to work out for you. We want to identify the way that worry is setting the stage and the terms of the game. The idea is to be an ally with your teen, not their problem solver, because you cannot reassure your teen for the rest of their lives. They have to learn to do this themselves. So you want to be able to offer compassion and empathy and love and support and help them figure out what to do. The learning process happens over time by reminding people of the ways in which they've succeeded in the past in spite of their worry. Anxiety is extremely talented at erasing memories of courage and triumph. So we feel disempowered, disheartened, and discouraged. With our worries, we have to help kids distinguish between a signal, something is happening, that car is coming very fast, I need to jump back, versus the noise, I'm never going to be able to pass my science class because I failed my last test and I'm going to fail the next test. Okay? The language that we want to use to help people combat that negativity, that negative expectancy, that defeated talk of anxiety is something like, I'm willing to feel unsure. I'm going to try to grab onto my courage like I did at this time and try something here. So this is challenging for many teenagers, and it's challenging for a lot of people right now because we can't remember when was something as challenging as this. But we've all had hardship in our lives. We've all had moments where we thought we weren't going to get through. And it's definitely worth it to sit down at the family table after dinner or during dinner and say, like, when was the last time things were really hard like this? What did we do? How did we get through? Maybe someone in your family died. Maybe someone was sick. Maybe you had to move suddenly out of your apartment or your home. The second thing to do is to try the worst case scenario exercise. If your teen follows the worry to its end, what happens? And what I think about doing this is we want to ask questions such as, and then what? And then what? And we go down the line until we get to whatever the end is. And when we get to that end, the question we want to ask is, can you live with that? Now, sometimes the end might be, this was going to happen, and this is going to happen, and then I'll be dead. And so to ask the question, well, can you live with that, is kind of, ironic, and it's sort of black humor, but you'll be dead. So what will the difference be? And I am joking here. So I hope you're smiling and laughing with me. What we want to do is point out the illogic of the anxiety. So remember, it's an overestimation of the problem and an underestimation of the skills. And that's what anxiety is. So when you are overestimating something, it's so distorted. We want to bring that back down. One of the things that helps in these moments when people are feeling anxious is breathing. And I know that when I'm upset, it's very hard to breathe. It's like I have dysfunctional breathing disorder, which is not a thing, but I'm just making it up and telling you, because I'm like, or I'm just like, oh, I'm so frothy, I'm all worked up, right? So what we want to do is to practice breathing exercises outside of a panicky event so that you know where you want to go to. Because if you don't know what calm feels like, you're not going to be able to get back there. Okay. So what are some things that we can do to practice breathing exercises? We'll get to that a little bit later, I promise you. Part of shifting our approach to anxiety is to opt for curiosity. Now, the persistent trauma of the pandemic has blended what I call trauma with a capital T, which is trauma that happens over and over and over again, recurrent trauma, versus trauma with a small t, which is a single incident trauma. I'm not minimizing trauma, I'm just distinguishing. So there's simple trauma, one-time event, and complex trauma, something that happens repeatedly. We are in a heightened state of anxiety because of complex trauma right now. It's happening over and over again. And it's very tough for all of us to stand in the uncertainty and the difficulties of complex trauma. So we hold our breath and we wait for whatever unfolds. But with the health stakes so high and the very real depression that many teens are experiencing from this isolation and social disconnection, it can feel impossible to shift to something different, to change the glasses that you're wearing to look through this, to have a different perspective. All of this business of not knowing what to expect just fuels our natural anxiety. It's how we're wired. So what we want to do is learn how to control what we can, okay? And that's why you may see in your teens higher incidence of and perhaps some obsessive compulsive behaviors, wanting things to be just so, getting angry if something they expected doesn't happen, right? So this is because they're trying to control something to lower the volume on their anxiety. The best thing that you can do for that control is to shift to curiosity. So whereas anxiety shuts you down and predicts negative outcomes, curiosity opens you to possibilities and helps you rely on your resilience. You say, I wonder, instead of I worry. Next slide. Of course, because of the trauma of what's happened with school, we have to talk about it and deal with it directly. We want to acknowledge and empathize with our kids' feelings and not ignore them. And we want to really try to identify what's been working, even if it's one or two things. Notice the successes, because that's what we want to build on. It's easy right now. It's winter. It's either rainy or maybe cold where you live. It could be perfectly nice some days and then kind of yucky the others. And that's how we feel. You know, some days are okay enough. Most days are and there's a couple bad ones. So we want to prepare for what's coming, and the way we're going to do that is by paying attention to what's worked, to shift our mindset from a fixed negative mindset to a growth-oriented mindset, which reduces dread. So this means we're going to brainstorm two types of plans. You're going to map out a schedule if things go this way, and you're going to map out a schedule or routine of things that go that way. And having a routine is very helpful right now because it gives kids a sense of predictability and autonomy and control over themselves in a situation where there's very little. This is about being proactive instead of reactive. And of course, we're going to try to continue to take what we've learned from the new so-called normal, and you know, continue with that now, and then pick one thing to tweak, because kids can really only change one thing at a time. In fact, I can only change one thing at a time. Okay, next slide. So let's take a minute right now, a couple minutes, and I'd love to answer some questions. So what questions do you have about how anxiety works in the body? What are some ways that you can talk back to anxiety? And what are some triggers that you're seeing in your kids that are fostering anxious reactions?
Okay, everybody, you can go ahead and put that into the question section. And so what are you looking for? Triggers?
What are some triggers that you're noticing? What types of things are worrying your kids? And how are you responding in ways that are working?
Okay. So anybody want to put something in there? It takes a few seconds before we
I'm
get
just
there.
tossing out a couple questions.
No, it's great.
People
Okay,
might
big
different.
trigger, the
Big trick.
unknown, questions that can't be answered. Yeah, I get that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a big trigger, and it's scary for all of us. Right now, will I get will I get the vaccine? Will the vaccine help me? Will I be able to go out? There is so much unknown, and that's why we have to kind of draw our circle around our daily life. We can't control so many things. So let's think about what we can do in our daily living that makes sense for us and helps us feel a sense of autonomy.
Okay, another one is not being able to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Hmm. I hear you on that one. It's kind of dark. It's a long
Yeah.
so again, maybe to sort of shift from the end at the tunnel to little lights along the way. So
Mm.
for me, I live in New England and it's winter. And usually in January, it's about 15 or 20 degrees with 2 feet of snow. For some reason, this January, so far, I'm knocking on wood, we've been blessed with weather in the 30s and not a lot of snow. And that means that I can walk outside almost every day. Is that going to help me later on? Does that make the end of the tunnel any closer? No, but it makes the tunnel of my 24 hours a little bit better. And so maybe instead of looking at days, we look at a block of 24 hours or a block of 7 days instead of 7 weeks to shorten our frame so that we're not looking out into a future that never seems to end. I think that will help us manage our anxiety, but it will also help our frame of mind day to day. What can I do today that will bring me some pleasure? What can we do as a family that might enhance our connectedness? Do we need to make popcorn and put on our pajamas and watch a movie tonight because we need a break?
All right. Another one here is more of a question. You know what? I'm going to wait on this one question toward the end.
Okay.
Another trigger is schoolwork is mundane and too much is given. They worry about peer acceptance. What works? Look at evidence for worries and shift to positive well-being. So a little bit of a statement too.
So that's a lot of things in one thing. So when we talk about the mundanity of schoolwork and what I see in a lot of school districts is they're just piling on like busy work because they can't really do what they're used to doing, which is in-person education. And so I think if your kids are not able to do the work that's being asked of them, particularly if they have learning challenges, talk to the school because you may need to get a 504 or an IEP, or you may need to adjust whatever educational plans are already in place. What's important now is your relationship with your kids and their relationship with themselves, right? Whether or not they complete 25 math problems is less important than if they do 12. And so how are you going to work with the school district to make that happen? Because mental health issues, severe anxiety, depression, ADHD, these actually affect someone's ability to be productive. Let's
Okay,
keep going. Oh,
I'm going to give you one more, and because this is a big one, I hear from a lot of parents, is my 8th grader is also having anxiety that he will not be ready for high school.
That is a very fair worry. And I hear this a lot too, Mary Beth. The good news is your 8th grader is in the same boat as all the other 8th graders in your school district. So, for whatever ways in which your 8th grader is not prepared, your 8th grader is not alone. And from the educators I know and with whom I speak, there will be adjustments made in terms of expectations of incoming 9th graders because this year has been so bizarre. And so what I think will happen is that there'll be catch up.
Okay, so we'll go ahead with the presentation.
Okay. Next slide. So I'm just going to quickly say that there are a lot of inequities in the access to hybrid education, which makes remote learning or much more difficult. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to say that if your child received academic support in a classroom or is not succeeding right now, it is on the school to help you get through. And this means that you need to put on your very, your hard hat and go in and really fight for what your child needs. Because this is a time when adjustments have to be made to accommodate particularly alternative learners, but also kids who are experiencing serious mental health issues. It's really helpful for kids if they can connect personally with a teacher or mentor, either weekly by phone, text, just alone time with someone in a school who matters to them. Next slide. So preparation, of course, reduces stress and builds confidence. Preparation is flexible. It lays a foundation. You go up a hike. When you go on a hike up a mountain, you have the supplies you need for food, a medical kit, a rain jacket, a flashlight, and a small towel. So you can take a turn off the trail and go for a swim. You have the tools you need and you're flexible in how you use them. It relies on collaborating, and that's the same thing that has to happen now in terms of both dealing with school and dealing with anxiety, is collaborating with our teens. And one of the things I hear so much from parents is their teens are shut down. They're very angry, and the people who are receiving that anger are the parents, because they're angry at the situation, or they're scared, or they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They're taking it out on you, and that isn't really going to help the situation. And so I feel like it's important for you to have a conversation with your teen about the fact that you're their ally. You don't want to be their taskmaster in terms of school. And so that's why we need to put stuff back onto the school. If you want to have a successful conversation with your teen, my advice is to do a few things. One, go somewhere in the car, even if it's to the grocery store, and talk to them then. Take a walk, or maybe with the dog, or just the two of you where you're not face to face, or go into their room at night when they're in bed, and they love to talk then. My daughter will love to come to me at 10:15 at night when I was just like ready to go to sleep, and she'd be like, "Mom, can we talk about something?" And I'd be like, "Ugh, where are the toothpicks for my eyes?" Right? We go in her room, I'd sit on the floor, she'd sit in bed, and then I'd hear about what was really going on. So we want to make ourselves available to our teens, and sometimes that face-to-face sitting down conversations are very awkward and uncomfortable for them. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about setting goals for kids and working together with them to get them done, what we're talking about are using incentives, not punishment. We want to motivate kids for unpleasant or unsatisfying tasks until their internal reward systems mature. And internal motivation systems kick in the late teens or early 20s for neurotypical kids. So our goal is we want to link have-tos to want-tos. And that means establishing a system of earned privileges that makes sense to their brains as well as yours. And for most families, this has to do with screen time, which is very complicated because a lot of parents have given away the store in terms of letting their kids have as much screen time as they want because they feel bad that their kids are lonely and depressed. And yet, if you give away the store, you don't have anything to negotiate with. So we have to dial it back a bit so that they have a certain amount of free screen time that they get every day, and then a bonus amount of time that they earn through doing chores that matter to them. So let's say you want your kid to have 3 hours of screen time outside of school a day. I know it's a low number, but I'm working with math here. And so they get the first 2 hours at a certain time every day. They get that when they finish their homework at 5, they get, or 4, they get 2 hours. And then that extra hour could be on a different device, and they get that by, practicing the piano or walking the dog or sitting with you to show you that they've turned their homework in. And that's how we can incentivize them. So we want to set appropriate goals that are linked to those incentives. I'm not there yet, sorry. To remember that kids who are alternative learners, kids with ADHD or learning disabilities or high functioning autism or other mental health issues, have to work a lot harder than their peers to get things done and to attend to unpleasant tasks. We have to talk a little bit about expectations. So whatever your teen was capable of before the pandemic may have very little to do with what they can do right now. And what they were able to do in March may have diminished to what they can do right now. For many kids, they're just able to do the bare minimum to get by. And fighting with them about doing more is going to do more damage to your relationship than the benefit of those of raising their grades. This is where we have to have a conversation with your teen, with the school, and with you about how to move forward appropriately. I would encourage you to talk with your teens about their goals for this year. It's January, this is a great time to do it, and share some of your own with them. Set up 2 sets of expectations. One, based on tasks they enjoy or have enjoyed and are easy and interesting to them. Those are the ones they're going to be more naturally motivated for and they'll be able to do. Then you need a second set of expectations based on subjects or activities that they struggle with. We want to shore up their strengths and challenges simultaneously, but not identically. So it's okay to make accommodations for tough classes in hybrid learning or remote learning without giving kids a pass. I have a client, and her daughter is dyslexic and has ADHD, and was basically failing 2 of her 4 classes. And her phone broke. So the mother said to her, "The marking period ends in 3 weeks. If you can pass all your classes, we will negotiate a phone and a plan for the use of that phone. And the hours with which you can use that phone will be linked to your continued passing grades." What happened? She brought up her grades. They were D+, C-, but she was passing. So that's what I'm talking about, like using incentives that matter to kids. The goal is that we want to focus on their adaptability and their growing self-esteem as well as their learning. Next slide. So what are some tips for successful routines? When we're tired, when we're stressed, our executive functioning skills are hit the worst, and our weakest executive functioning skills, are hit the worst. Overall, using alerts on phones and computers for reminders when classes are starting, when breaks are happening, when banners are flying across the screen, kids pay attention. For days when your student is at home, and this could be every day, make sure to include time for a snack and stretch, physical movement, and some screen-free time just to rest their eyes. Our brains need that. We can't consolidate the information we're learning or metabolize it systemically, like to actually get it without having some screen breaks. Try to budget in some fun time as well. Help your kids see their friends in safe ways, whatever that is in your community or in your family. If that's wearing masks, being 6 feet apart at your driveway, that's great. If that's wearing masks and being at a park on either side of a bench, or being in your backyard or on your balcony in your apartment, so that you can have some supervision. Make sure kids go out with hand sanitizer and their masks. They may or may not wear them, but at least they have them. With teens, you want to talk about what it means to be safe and what's really happening with their friends. In my town, teens are sneaking off and getting high with their friends, or sneaking off and drinking with their friends. And not only is that terrible in terms of the substance abuse, but the COVID contagion is terrible. They're sharing their devices, let's just say, or their bottles, and they're spreading germs. And so it's worth talking about what the effects of that will be on your family. I work with one family, and the 14-year-old would really like to hang out with more than one friend because their family formed a pod with another family. But she wants to see her grandparents, and she doesn't want her grandparents to be sick. And so she's made this sacrifice, and it's a big sacrifice. Try to work alongside your kids for homework. Have some sort of family work time. Often kids can't, a lot of kids, they don't stay on task themselves. They wander around. They might want to sit in one place one time, in one place another. That's okay. They can have a couple different places to study. Maybe their bed is not the best place. In fact, I personally think doing school in your bed is not a great idea. That doesn't mean you can't be in your bedroom, and maybe you need the door open, but lying in bed isn't conducive to being in school because it's where you chill out, right? And so that's what your body is responding to. Often teens and tweens lack the impulse control to stay with the work at hand instead of going on YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, or Instagram. And they hate online learning. So if you could have a time where you're all sitting at the table doing work, including you, I'm sure you have emails or projects or whatever you're working on, then you can be there to help redirect them or to casually get up and get a glass of water and see actually what they're doing. Aim for steadiness, not perfection. So you want to do the best you can. You want to acknowledge that they're doing the best they can, and if not, we're going to regroup and try again. Next slide, please. What are some common problem areas in families of teens right now, particularly around anxiety? We're rescuing kids. We're reassuring them that everything's going to be okay when they know darn well they're not sure it is. And we overprotect them. We try to shield them from things by giving them, giving into them, giving what they want, by accommodating behaviors that are inappropriate. And this isn't actually doing anything except helping anxiety grow stronger. So when you make exceptions to anxiety, like, oh no, you can stay in your bed and not come to dinner because I know you're anxious, what anxiety is like, yes, I won. Right? Instead of, no, we come to dinner in our family. That's what we do. And we put our phones down, and for 30 minutes, we hang out together. This anxiety doesn't like that because it wants you to give in to its irrational demands and its insecurity, instead of saying, we come to dinner, whether it's COVID or not. Sometimes parents, we push too hard and we get angry. We get angry at our kids for their irrational anxiety. We get angry at the anxiety itself. Also, anxiety likes this a lot because if you're angry, parent, at me, teen, with anxiety, then I can be angry with you. I can export all my anxiety and my frustration onto you, and then I'll walk away feeling much better and you'll feel terrible. We accommodate, as I said, but we do it in the service of avoiding things without an instruction of skills of how to cope with the thing that people want to avoid. So we want to ask ourselves, am I responding in a way that anxiety would like? Next slide. So what are some strategies for dealing with lying, avoidance, and pushback? So what we want to do is that we want to become a lie detective. That's our job. Honesty is really consistent. Lies shift and change. Rehearsed stories are usually false. We want to observe facial and bodily expressions. Honesty looks relaxed and open with direct eye contact. We want to set up reasonable and logical consequences. So ask your child or teen, what do you think should happen if I find out, I look on the history, or I look on our internet and see that you were online at 2 a.m. in the morning. What do you think the consequence of that should be? How am I going to earn back your trust? Ask them some of these questions rather than yelling at them or telling them what you're going to do. Get their buy-in. That buy-in is really important for teenagers. It's that foundation of that collaboration I was speaking about earlier. So you want to set up some of these logical consequences and be predictable and fair in what they are. You want whatever the so-called, punishment to fit the crime. And I'm not a fan of punishment because it doesn't teach skills. But logical consequences make sense. If I tell you not to drive my car while I'm at work, and I come home from work and you drove my car, I got a ride with a friend, let's say, or that doesn't make any sense now either, but let's say I go to work and there's another car and you drive the car and you smash it up. You know, telling you you're never going to drive again is actually not going to, I mean, it's not really going to teach you anything. It may be how you feel. But telling your child you're going to sit with me while I call the insurance company, you're going to be here when the insurance company comes, you're going to come with me when I take the car to get estimates, you're going to basically ride your bike for 2 months, and then you're going to have to drive with me for another month so I can make sure that your driving is okay. You set up something that relates to the offense, okay? So instead of the punishment fits the crime, what we want to know, does the consequence fit the offense, okay? Remember that pushback and oppositional behavior often may mask other emotions, such as anxiety or depression, particularly in boys, and that kids act out when they're bored and they're angry and they're frustrated. Expect it. So when they see it, it's not like a surprise, like, oh my gosh, look what's happening. It's like, oh, of course, this is happening again. So you want to create a plan for how to deal with those moments that naturally come up that you've seen, and put in non-cooperation clauses using that earned privileges mindset. And finally, we want to differentiate between guilt and shame. Shame is I'm a bad person for what I've done. Guilt is I did something bad, but I'm actually a good person. And we want to teach our kids, we want to lean on into guilt instead of into shame. Next slide. So how are we going to help your family feel less overwhelmed by anxiety and what's going on? We're going to remember that people can only change one thing at a time, and kids get overwhelmed by too many directions and too many steps. You're going to talk about the priorities for this spring with your team, and include a consultation with the school around homework or academic goals. What is the plan you're going to set up for success, for the successful completion of work? And use incentives to teach the difference between have-tos and want-tos, and logical consequences for misbehaviors and non-cooperation. Improve working memory, and working memory is what we hold in our brain for a short period of time before it transfers to the longer term memory. It's not that instantaneous short term memory, it's in between. So if I say, I want you to get your shoes and meet me at the door, you remember to get your shoes and meet me at the door. Many people with ADHD struggle with working memory. So start writing things down, particularly for teens who are a little depressed or frustrated. They may forget things. Their attention isn't as strong as it was. You know, use Post-its, texts, voice memos. Expect your teens to forget things and then be surprised when they don't. Oh, I have so much to go through and not much time. So when we want to talk, when we're teaching about anxiety, we want to stop reassuring and start encouraging. So reassurance, telling them it's going to be okay, doesn't actually provide a lasting solution, because A, they don't believe you, and B, then they learn to rely on you to make things better for them. So it's a short-term decrease in anxiety, but actually a longer-term increase. And we want to validate instead of reassure. You're right to be scared. I see that you're scared. I understand that this is frustrating. It's hard to know how to handle it. It's natural to worry in this situation. Let's brainstorm some options. Your job is to maintain your support of your teen in the face of super irritating, super frustrating, and scary behaviors, because they feel out of control. That's why those behaviors are existing in the first place. And what you can do is reflect back to them, I'm frustrated. I don't know what to do to help you. That is actually a better way to go than telling them why what they're doing is wrong and not okay. Well, no, I mean, I think it's fine to tell them it's not okay, but by telling them what they're doing is wrong or how they're not measuring up. Excuse me. So to grow this positive mindset, to grow an ability to see that you can learn from experiences rather than everything is sort of fixed the way it is, you want to set realistic goals and expectations. You want to acknowledge challenges or weaknesses and see vulnerabilities as areas for improvement instead of character flaws. We want to focus on what people can change, what they really can change, instead of what they can't control. You want to rely on and develop practical coping strategies that encourage growth. And you want to nurture a talent or a strength, and so that kids can have that positive view of themselves that they take out in the world. Moving forward, I want to encourage you to zoom out, okay? This is a really terrible time. And, you know, my father is 87. So he was born in the Depression. He lived through World War II. He was a child. He served in the Korean War. He's lived through all kinds of things since the 60s, the 70s, and on. He tells me this is the hardest thing he's ever done, right? And he has perspective, and he can zoom out and he can say, well, I went to Korea, or we lived through, the riots of the 60s, or the death of Martin Luther King or John F. Kennedy. Those were also terrible times. How did we respond? How did we bounce back? And so we want to zoom out for our kids. It may look like right now is the worst time ever and there's not any hope. Try to take a larger view and see, have there been other dark times? What did we do in those dark times? How did my child cope with them? How did I cope? So my advice is to be persistent in getting the help your student needs if they need more academic support or accommodations. Celebrate the small wins. One thing I'm recommending to families right now is to get some Post-its, and every day everybody writes one thing that was pretty good about their day. Doesn't have to be fabulous. It can be my hair looked good, or I liked my breakfast, or I got a B+ on my history test, and just have a wall and put the Post-its up on the wall, and at the end of the week stand together and look at them, and then you can take them down and go to the next week, just so that we're balancing all of this negativity with something that is acknowledging that there was a highlight or two in the day, or even a medium light. Acknowledge that fears and concerns are real before you do or say anything. This will help you stay patient and positive. Anxiety is frightening and powerful, and it wants to throw you off. Name a worry so you can devise a plan to talk back to it. I love when kids name their worries. It's really fun, and it sounds like it might be juvenile, but it's not. You can, name your math worry, or name your do I look good worry, and then you can come up with some things to say to it. And role plays can be a fun way to do that. Help kids access the facts versus the fiction about what's going on right now. You want your kids to hear things from you, not from the internet, particularly with what's happening politically right now and the rumors about the vaccines. You have to be a source of information, and maybe you sit down with them together and you research it. That's helpful. Limit the news intake if you need to at your family, and answer questions honestly. We want to teach kids, ultimately, who are anxious to tolerate their discomfort and their disappointment, and recall and hold on to their capacities for success. This is what builds resilience. What is the big goal right now is a positive connection with your team. That doesn't mean capitulating to them or handing over your parental authority. It means working with them for solutions and holding your ground when they don't cooperate. Make choices that support a balanced relationship. If your child needs help, speak to your pediatrician or your primary care provider, get a referral for a therapist or a counselor, and try not to worry yourself about your kids not doing well. Your worry about your kids' state of affairs only makes them more anxious. Now, I'm not saying you're going to poo-poo it. What I'm saying is you're going to hold out hope that things can be different. That's what your kid needs. And the kinds of behaviors that you're looking for in terms of worrisome behaviors would be, changes from past behaviors in terms of isolation, lethargy, what makes them happy, a lack of interest in activities, which of course we're going to see all of these. It's the degree and frequency. Are you sad some days? Are you sad every day? And how much are you sad? When you're talking to your kids, use compassion and empathy, not judgment. Be a sounding board. Try to use what, how, where, when, maybe instead of why, and do that distracting activity. And reframe can'ts into uncertainty. I'm not sure, I don't know, I'm afraid to, instead of I can't do this. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'd love to take some questions in our remaining time.
All right, Dr. Saline, while the questions are coming in, I just wanted to put up this slide. This is how you can get in touch with Dr. Saline. If you have questions or you want to follow her, she has great information on her website. So I encourage you to go check that out. Again, please check out Operation Parent's webinars at operationparent.org. We do have a parent handbook that goes over a lot of these topics, again, providing information. Where do you go for more help? What are the warning signs? You can purchase that at Operation Parent's shop online. All right, so let's just go back here and let me get back to this slide here, and let me just pull up the questions and see what we have here. Got a few here. Okay, one is how do you respond to youth when they say calming breathing doesn't work for me because of my anxiety?
That's a great question. Mary Beth, could you put up the slide about how to connect with me, because it went by super fast and
oh sure,
I didn't even read it. I know what's on it.
There you go. We'll have that up.
When kids are telling you that breathing doesn't work for them, what they're actually saying to you is, it's not calming my thoughts. So you're asking me to calm my body, but it's not doing anything for my thinking, right? So what we want to do is try to address the worried thinking. This is where we have to access those beliefs. So when kids are telling me breathing isn't help because it doesn't stop that buzz in my head, I say, tell me what the buzz is saying to you. And I write that down, write that down. What are the negative things that buzz is saying? And what would it be like if we stepped back and we looked at those statements as if they weren't yours, but they belonged to a friend of yours? What would you say if a friend of yours was telling you that? Because a lot of times what we say to ourselves is not what we would say to our friends. I say to kids, if you wouldn't say it to a 3-year-old to a 3rd grader who scraped their leg, why would you say it to yourself? And so there are these repetitive thoughts and they just loop around. So we want to look at the process of that loop and what is, if any, a kind of gain that happens. If you're in that loop, what are you not thinking about? Right?
Okay.
So breathing isn't going to help if you're going to do this, right?
Yeah.
So the kind of breathing I'm talking about, which I actually didn't get to in the presentation, so thank you so much for asking, is alternate nostril breathing, which actually does help. So it's from yoga. So you take a finger, you close one nostril, you breathe in deeply, and then you take another finger and you do the same. Sometimes I have kids put their hand right here and breathe in a color. They close their eyes, picture a color, and they breathe in that color right into their hand. So actual taking deep breaths generally isn't going to work. We have to attach it to some other thing, right? And the reason that the alternate nostril breathing works is because it's an activity. And you can do the same thing with, you know, smell the flower and blow out the candle. Some kids like that, some kids don't.
All right, they're great, great ideas. Um, it feels like there's a fine line between reassuring and acknowledging what's going on and reframing. Can you talk more about the differences?
Yes, there is a fine line between reassuring, acknowledging, and reframing. That's a great question. So when we are reassuring, we are telling them it's going to be okay. Don't worry,
Mm,
I've got this. Okay. Versus acknowledging, which is you have every right to be afraid. It's like a neutral observation. This is the situation of what's going on. Versus reframing, which is where we want to get to, which is what would it be like if you said to yourself, I'm afraid of this and I want to move forward. What would it take to move forward? Okay. Or to say the reframing is I wonder about what would happen if versus I'm worried about what's going to happen if. It's an
okay.
open versus a closing.
Um, okay, so I guess here's another question in talking about this. How can I encourage students to switch from worry to wonder? And
Mm.
what might that look like for them in the moment?
Right. So in the moment, if someone's worried, they're fixed on something not working out. They're in a fear response. Their amygdala is driving the car that is them. Okay. In when we want to shift to worry, what we want to do is we want to give some neutral observational feedback. I see that you're really worried about this. I see that you're not sure you can handle it, right? I'm wondering what it would be like if we could maybe explore one or two options of what it working out would look like.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
And it's also, I've heard many times, is to practice some of this stuff when they're not in the midst of it.
Well, that's
Is
exactly
that
right. That's
true?
the thing about the brain. That's the thing about the breathing, and that's actually about meditation. You know, all of the
Mhm.
meditation teachers will say it doesn't help if you don't practice meditation outside of when you need it.
Yeah.
No. Yes,
No,
absolutely.
that's right.
Okay. I double negative to myself too much, right? So, you know, uh, we want to practice what it feels like, and it's the same thing with shifting from worry to wonder. We practice it on something that doesn't matter that much, so that when something big comes along, we have that skill.
That makes perfect sense. Um, let's see here. I think I have one more. Um, can you share resources about incentivizing and the age of maturity for internal motivation?
Sure. Resources, I would encourage you to go to my website because I have a lot of stuff on motivation. I also have some YouTube videos on my YouTube channel. Um, Motivation is a pretty complicated thing. We could do a whole workshop on motivation. Invite me back. I'm happy to do that. Um, uh, when we talk about motivation, there's extrinsic motivation, also known as external motivation. You know, I turn in my permission form for driver's ed so I can start the class on Monday. And then there's intrinsic motivation. I'm going to work on my paper really hard because I like the feeling of writing a good paper, versus I'm going to work really hard on my paper because I only want to get an A, and if I don't get an A, it's not worth anything.
Mm.
Or I enjoy the process of writing. And so
Hmm.
intrinsic motivation develops over time. And we learn to sort of set up extrinsic motivators for ourselves that we internalize. So I don't know about you, Mary Beth, or any of you parents out there, you know, after dinner, I don't really want to do the dishes. I kind of want to sit and watch my show. But when I don't do the dishes, then I have to do the dishes after I've watched my show when I'm all like cozy and sleepy and I want to go to bed. So I've
Hmm.
learned that I do the dishes first and then I watch my show. And that's something that motivates me, right? It's my intrinsic motivator. It's like I'm going to do the dishes and then I'm going to watch the show so I don't have a messy kitchen later. And that's a skill that takes a lot of time to develop. And so I think that many parents expect their kids to be more intrinsically motivated earlier than they actually can. And particularly now, when there are so few external motivators, it's even harder to have intrinsic motivation.
Yes, I can see that. It makes perfect sense, because what are you going to motivate them with sometimes?
Right. And it's like a lot of kids are experiencing like, well, why does this matter? Who cares?
Right.
What's the difference? And that's that really sort of despairing, kind of disheartening beliefs that are related to just how hard things are right now.
Yes, that's very true. And I believe one more popped in. Somebody else just made a comment and said, I think teachers also think youth have more mature intrinsic motivation also. So some teachers have that opinion that they can self-motivate.
That's right. And so the thing is that a lot of students, particularly high-flying students, are struggling right now in ways they've never had to struggle before, because the motivators, the relationship with their teachers, all the goodies around being with their friends, the excitement of learning and being in an environment of ideas, many of those things have gone away. And so what I'm seeing in a lot of kids who've not struggled in school before is they've lost something and they can't get back, and they're not psyched about doing what's in front of them.
Yeah, I can see it. I see it around, my son's in college, and it was a hard first semester. You mentioned during your discussion that follow the what ifs. Well, what if that happens? And what if that happens? And we went down that path. And it, for him, it was very, very scary until we hit the end. And then it became, all right. I'm like, can you live with that? Yep. And it changed his way of thinking tremendously to just go down that path with him. So I definitely encourage parents, don't be so scared of that. It can allow them to see, what is a real possibility as opposed to an imagined possibility when the anxiety's rolling.
That's exactly right. And good for you for hanging in there with him, because it's scary to do that what if process, and you have to keep going through it. And that's the thing about anxiety. Anxiety doesn't want you to go through anything. It wants you to stop when you feel the fear.
So that was my foster dog who's saying, hey, I fit in this crate.
Right. Well, bravo for you. And I want to say to everyone, thank you so much for joining. I give trainings for educators and parents internationally. Please contact me. It's been a pleasure having you. And if you have more questions, feel free to contact me through my website. And check me out on Facebook. I do live Facebook session every Friday through attitudemag.com for parents, adults, and teens who are living with ADHD, learning disabilities, and autism, as well as all the other mental health stuff. So join us anytime.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close down the webinar. Sorry about this.
Oh, I want to say one more thing, Mary
Yes.
Beth. To parents out there, I'm doing an Instagram Live next week it's for teens and young adults on COVID. So check out my my Facebook or my Instagram for details. But this would be something where your kid would go and not you. So
that's a wonderful.
Other kids, other young, older teens and young adults to get some support.
Could you do me a favor? Can you send that to me in an email so I can add that to the follow-up email?
Absolutely, I will. I'll do that. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day. Thanks so much for joining. And thank you, Mary Beth, for having me. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you so much. Dr. Saline, you did a wonderful job. It's always a pleasure. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and shut down the webinar. The recording, as I mentioned, will come to you in about 6 hours in the follow-up email. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.